Are you looking for a simple sleeveless summer top to knit? This one is a perfect, easy sweater to make. There are no decreases or increased stitches, just plain simple knitting with beautiful edgings on the top and down the sides of your sweater. Let's get started and work on this together. All right, this summer top has a very simple knitting construction. We are basically just knitting two rectangle shapes of fabric, one for the front and one for the back of your sweater. So you can see that I've already knitted the front panel. Now together we will knit the exact same size and construction for the back panel. You'll notice that I have a nice little seed stitch border on the bottom and the top of the sweater, which is going to give it just a really nice decorative neckline and baseline for the sweater. It also has that same seed stitch on the very side panels. After we get both panels completed, we are just going to do some very simple seaming up here on the tops of the shoulders and then along the sides, leaving room for the armholes. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to be working with a cast on called the German twisted cast on. Now I have an entire video all about that, giving you detailed instructions. If you'd like to review that, if you're unfamiliar with that specific cast on, you're welcome to do that. I'll have a link in the upper right hand corner and also in the description below. But if you'd like to use another type of cast on, feel free. This is just the one that I chose. It just has a very nice decorative edge, a very pretty edge that I thought would look great for this sweater. All right, let's get started with this cast on again. Please watch that other video about this cast on if you need some additional instructions. Today I am using a bamboo acrylic blend yarn that's just going to make for a very nice flowing lightweight summer top. And I am also using a US size 6 needle. We are knitting this flat, so I'm just using a long circular needle and knitting back and forth. So let me cast on my stitches. I am casting on for a medium size sweater, 74 stitches. Now I will have the cast on stitch counts for the other sizes on the side of the video here. If you'd like, I will also have a link to the full written pattern in the description below if you prefer to follow along with that. All right, we are done with our cast on. So now we're going to start with this base of the sweater, the band at the bottom, and that is done with a seed stitch. Our very first row is actually the wrong side row of the sweater. And we're going to start with a simple knit one, purl one sequence. So the first stitch will be a knit one, then a purl one, back to knit, purl, and we're going to do that all the way across for row number 1. Right, row 1 complete. Now we're going to jump to row number 2, and row number 2 is going to be the same kind of a knit one, purl one sequence, but it's just going to be in the opposite order. So when we turn our work here, now we're working on the right side of our fabric, you'll see that this very first stitch has the knit side facing me and the purl side is the second stitch facing me. I'm going to do just the opposite stitch from what is shown by starting with a purl stitch. So let's bring our yarn to the front and purl this first stitch. And now this next stitch you can see has the purl bump facing me, so now it tells me that I need to now knit that second stitch. So this second row we are starting with the purl stitch, then doing the knit stitch, and then I start that over again. So purl, I'm purling the knit stitch below and knitting the purl bump that I see facing me. It's just the opposite of what we did, and that produces this nice seed stitch type fabric. So let's do this for row number 2, and then we're just going to repeat those 2 rows, rows number 1 and 2, this knit 1, purl 1 sequence for a total of 13 rows. And that will complete this bottom section, and then we'll move on to the body of the sweater, which is mostly stockinette stitch in the middle with just a little bit of that seed stitch border on both ends. So I will see you when I'm done with this first little section. I've completed the 13 rows of the seed stitch, which is going to be the bottom of our sweater. So now we're going to kind of do a little bit of transition to the basic body of the sweater, which is going to be just solid stockinette stitching, which is knitting on one side and purling on the other. But it also is going to incorporate this same seed stitch on the edges. So the first 4 stitches and the last 4 stitches of each row is going to be the seed stitch. So let's show you what that looks like. This is the right side where we are going to be knitting across for our stockinette, but let's start with 4 stitches of this seed stitch. We're going to start with a purl stitch on the right side here. So we're going to purl 1, then knit 1, purl 1, and knit 1. So that is the 4 stitches of our seed stitch edge. If you'd like, you can place a stitch marker just to kind of remind yourself that now you're switching to just stockinette stitch for most of the way across. So for stockinette, we are going to be knitting on the right side, just knitting all the stitches. So let's do that till we have 4 stitches before the end of this row, and then we'll switch back to that seed stitch for the last 4 stitches. All right, I'm approaching the end of the stockinette stitch section, and I've got 4 stitches left. If you like, again, you can place a stitch marker to remind yourself that you're switching now to that seed stitch edge here. We're going to be doing our first stitch of this edging with a purl stitch, then go to knit 1, purl 1, and end with a knit stitch. Okay, so now I had seed stitch on the edge and stockinette in the middle. So that means on round 2, we are going to, or row 2, excuse me, we're going to also do that seed stitch for the first 4 stitches. This time we're starting with a knit stitch, then purl, knit, and purl. Let's slip our marker telling us that we are now switching to stockinette stitch on the wrong side of the fabric. We are going to be purling all of our stitches. So we'll purl all the way to the end except for those last 4 stitches. Finish this row with that seed stitch again. Slip my marker, and we'll start this time with a knit stitch, then purl, knit, and purl for the end of row 2. Now we'll turn our work and we'll just continue that rows 1 and 2, and we'll kind of hang out there for quite a while because this we want to make this as long as our torso here until we get to the top neckline part here. So hang out here for quite a while, going back and forth, repeating that row 1 and 2, stockinette in the middle, seed stitch on the side. I will see you when I get to the point where we can start the top neckline. Okay, I've completed the body of the sweater. I'm done with this stockinette section, and this is about 19 inches from the base of my cast on to where I'm stopping the stockinette stitching. Now I want it to be the exact same size as the other piece, so instead of going by measurements, I made sure I counted the number of rows I completed in stockinette stitching all the way up to the point where we're going to do our neckline, and made sure I did this in the same number of rows. For my calculation, it was 102 rows of that stockinette stitch, so that's what I completed for the other panel, so they can be exactly the same. So now it's time to just switch now to working seed stitch every single row to create this top seed stitch neckline. And then we'll have 2 panels exactly the same. And when I'm done with that section, then we'll come back to do some seaming on the shoulders and also down the sides. So I will see you when I have that completed, and we'll do the bind off and the seaming. Now that we've completed our 12 rows of seed stitch for that neckline, we are ready to bind off. Now I chose to do the German twisted cast on for the cast on edge. So I have chosen now for the bind off edge to do the Icelandic bind off because it most similarly looks like the German cast on. So the base and the top will look fairly similar. So I'm going to show you how to do that Icelandic bind off. Now, of course, you can really choose any type of bind off you feel most comfortable with. This is the one that I just chose to do with this, but as long as your bind off has a little bit of a give or a little bit of a stretch to go over your head, it should be fine. But if you like to choose the Icelandic one, here's how that stitch goes. All right, our very first stitch on our needle, we are going to knit that stitch, take it off the needle, and now we're going to put it back on the left needle, but in the opposite direction. So we're going to come at it from underneath and bring that stitch back to the other needle so it's kind of twisted in the opposite direction, okay? Now we're going to take our right needle and insert it into this first stitch as if you're going to purl it, but don't purl it or take it off the needle yet. But now we're going to wrap our needle around this second stitch and bring that stitch through that first stitch. Okay, so you just kind of brought that stitch through the first stitch that was on your left needle, and now we're going to knit that stitch. And now you can take both those stitches off your left-hand needle, and you've got one stitch on this side. So now we're going to repeat those steps by now taking that stitch again and placing it back on your left needle by going underneath and just bringing it over to your left needle. Now let's again put the first stitch on your right needle as if you're going to purl, and then just grab that second stitch and bring it through that first stitch. And now you can knit that stitch. And take both stitches off your needle, and we'll do it again. Bring that stitch to the left needle, insert it onto our right needle, and bring that second stitch through that first stitch. And now you can knit it and bring both stitches off. Okay, so that's the Icelandic bind off. I will continue to do that all the way to the end, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to do some seaming. All right, now that our sweater is bound off at the top here, we are ready to do some seaming. So I already did one little shoulder seam, and I'll show you how to do the second shoulder seam. I've put some little stitch markers in place. I determined for my medium-sized sweater that I wanted the neckline to be 11 inches long. So according to my calculations, that meant I need to do like a 4-inch seam on both sides. Now I will have specific measurements for the neckline and the armhole in my written pattern, and that link to that written pattern will be in the description below. But I would start measuring according to what my pattern calls for, and then you can try it on and determine if your neckline needs to be a little wider or narrower. Same thing with the sleeves, and make an adjustment to make it fit nicely for you. Okay, so let's do the seaming on this other shoulder, and then we'll do the seaming on the side as well. We are going to be doing a mattress stitch seam that creates a very nice invisible seam on the front side, throwing kind of the edging to the back where you won't see it. So that's what we're going to do on all sides here. I am going to take a new working yarn and thread it onto my darning needle. And we've got our wrong sides of our sweater facing each other, and we're going to be working on the outside edge. Let's remove this stitch marker in the corner here, and now I'm just going to stick my needle in one corner, picking up 2 threads, and then go to the opposite side and connect the 2 pieces at the corner, leaving a bit of a tail to weave in. All right, so let's identify where we're going to be picking up these stitches for the mattress stitch. We did this Icelandic bind off, which gave a nice little ripply edge here, but it makes it a little bit harder to see where to pick up the stitches. But if you can kind of identify where this outside ridge is, where all these little bumps are on the ridge, we're going to go just below that and pick up the stitch right beneath that ridge, okay? So let's first take a look at this side here. You can see kind of our ridge consists of a bump and a bump on top and bottom. So let's go underneath that bump. See the V at the top of that row of stitch, or that column of stitches? That's where we want to pick up our stitch. On the right side, pull our yarn through. So on the other side, we're going to go underneath this row of bumps and pick up this V stitch close to the edge. That's our first column of stitches next to the edge stitch. And we'll go through that, pull our yarn through. And when we go to the other side, we're actually going to go in right where we came out last time. And this time our next column of stitches ended with a purl stitch. You can see that there's a purl bump here, and then you've got the bump of the bound off edge. We're going to go actually right between those two purl bumps, or those two bumps, and pick up the legs of stitches between those two bumps. And we're going to see that also on the other side. There's two bumps. We're going to go right in between those two bumps to pick up that stitch on that side. Now on the other side, this is our bump from our cast on, so we're going to go just below that and pick up the legs of stitches under there. That's where the knit stitch was at the top. And we'll do that also on this side. When you have a few stitches in, you can kind of pull it a little tighter, and that will kind of close up that seam nicely so you can not even see that seam. And we're going to continue down this length. We're going to end at our stitch marker here because that's just going to be the shoulder. Then we're going to have the opening for the neck. All right, when you got to your stitch marker, you can remove that and give it one last tug here. Now we're just going to insert our stitch or needle on the other side and go inside the sweater. And to close this up, we're just going to do a little bit of a series of just a whip stitch. We're just going to be picking up these little legs on the seam here from one side to the next, just to kind of secure that end. When you did that for a few stitches, now you can take the tail of your working yarn here and just kind of weave it in to the base of this seam for a few stitches just to tuck in that end. Okay, and we can snip off that edge. All right, so let's see how that seam looks on this side. Beautiful. You can do the same thing with this tail down the seam to kind of secure that end and weave that end as well. So now we have both of our shoulder seams completed. Now let's work on our side. So here is our gap for the sleeve. So we're going to seam together from this marker all the way down to the edge. Now this opening for me was 7.5 inches, but again, refer to the pattern for the other size armhole widths. And if you need to adjust, make it longer or shorter for your body type, feel free to try it on and make those adjustments. Okay, so this is the area we're going to seam from the bottom corner up to this other marker. So we will, doesn't matter which end you start in, let's get ourselves a new piece of working yarn. I'm going to want it quite long. And let's start seaming on this side. So again, right where our marker is, we're going to kind of connect the two sides. One side here, and the other side over here. Pull our yarn through, give it a little bit of a tail, and now let's remove this so it's not in our way. And we'll begin to do the mattress stitch down this side. Now these are the ends of the row, so it's a little bit easier to see. We're going to be picking up the stitches right after this last edge stitch, right between the second to the last stitch and this stitch. We're going to pick up the little horizontal bar between this last edge stitch and the second to the last stitch. See that little bar? Those are the bars we're going to pick up on both sides. So let's identify this first bar here on this side. Pull that yarn through, careful to leave yourself your tail. And then on the other side, we will also pick up that first bar right after that edge stitch. On the other side as well, the next bar right between the edge stitch and that second stitch. And we're going to go back and forth between both sides, picking up that horizontal bar. So this will take you a little bit of time to get down to the bottom of the sweater, but it's much easier to see where those stitches are that you're going to be picking up. And then again, every few stitches, just pull your stitching a little bit tighter so it can kind of smooth out that seam. Okay, so let me continue all the way down to the bottom, and then we will also do the other side. All right, I have completed all of my seaming. I weaved in all my ends. The seaming looks really beautiful along the edges. Beautiful completed sweater. I am going to block this sweater now. I do a wet block. That's just going to make sure that everything is laid nice and smooth. The edges line up nicely. And then it will be time to try it on and enjoy. Well, I hope you like this tutorial and that you give this sweater a try. It is so easy and a great addition to your summer wardrobe. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll receive lots of future tutorials all about knitting tips and techniques, fun stitches, and creative patterns. Thanks for watching. Happy knitting.